But I'm curious your stance on that, because you've probably seen small talk used for good and for evil, or successfully or unsuccessfully.
No, I think you're spot on in terms of there are different types of conversations, right, and different types of relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in small talks between human beings, even if you're calling the bank, you're talking to a teller, and you have a relationship with them, it's basically, it could have just has been a robot, right? Very sophisticated robot, but it's a human being, and because they're a human being, number one, right? Like we have an axiom in our life, sort of like a core moral thing, like don't treat human beings as an object, right? So we have to, or as an end. So we always have to sort of give a nod to that basic principle, right? I'm not just using you, even though this is transactional. So in that sense, the small talk makes sense. I think here the small talk has a different purpose, right? I think maybe the purpose is just to relax the person in terms of making them feel like this bot is there to help them, right? That it's not hard to use, perhaps. That it's that it's not a computer data thingy, right? That it's a thing that you can talk to. So it feels to me like humanizing it in that benign way is functional in terms of making the interaction, or at least relaxing the person so that they're able to interact in a natural way, right? They don't speak in staccato, right? They speak naturally, because speech is speech recognition is trained for you speaking naturally, right? Whereas if you think this is a robot, like you start talking maybe weirdly, right? So I think in that sense, I see definitely the virtues of humanizing, and then I guess the thing that sort of that have been thinking about lately is this humanizing and building trust being exploited to let the guards of the folks who are using these technologies down, right? So they may give you more information than they should, because they think you're a friend. The bot is a friend. It's Alexa. She's nice. She does all these things for me. And when she asks me, would you like to do this or that? And maybe I'll err towards being nice. Anyway, these are just thoughts that are very initial in my head.
I think people smell a rat really quickly when the tech field is like interested in making money, and so we know that like a lot of this technology is, people are champing at the bit to get us to buy stuff through this technology, because ads and stuff, and the idea is like, oh, it's useful to you, but people really don't like this thing is in your home. And so if you get the sense that your Google Assistant or your Alexa is trying to sell you something, I think that really gives people cold feet. And it's actually, and that's true for people too. Like I'm just kind of remembering years ago, a friend of mine had this boyfriend, and he was selling these water alkalinizing machines. The nicest guy in the world, but too nice. And every time you talk to him, 3 minutes in, he's trying to sell you one of these water machines. And it just gives me a chuckle, because it's like, we don't like that when people do it to each other either.
True. Yeah. There's sort of you turn into this, all of a sudden the person turns into this robot, like, just kicking in, you're just trying to, is what I said before, right? That you're trying to simply be transactional with me.
Yeah.
And a good salesperson, right? The good salesperson is the one who sort of blurs the line. They build a relationship with you, and they become friends. And it's not like they're being deceptive. It's just that they understand that human nature is not. There are people not going to buy from you necessarily just because of the features, because they like you. That's what they say in sales. If they like you, right, and they see that you're doing your job, and it's your job to sell. And you're not just manipulating, you're being honest, right? Then you can be a salesperson and not be transactional. I mean, that's what a great salesperson does, is that they get you to buy because you like them, and the product, of course, has to perform. But they could have bought it from somebody else, but they chose you. So those two, humanize and trust, for me, always get me to think about, hey, maybe maybe we need to be more careful. But I think, as you said, people are more sophisticated than that. I'm worried though about but maybe everybody worried about the new generation, right? Are they going to trust these robots too much? And also the folks who are on the older end of the spectrum, right? These Alexas a bit naively, I've discovered, right? So they like her voice, and she's friendly, and they're lonely. And so I'm sure there are stories out there of people scamming using these smart speakers. So let me go to the next question. And this one, I wonder if the new generation of folks who are designing have had to deal with, to the same extent that we, the folks in the IBR, would have to, which is this, right? Let me give you a scenario, right? Let's say Travelocity came to you and said, Rebecca, we want to enable people to book their trips using voice only, okay, without having to speak to someone. And we want them to buy their airplane tickets, book their hotel room, their car rental, without having to look at anything. Okay. And then they said, okay, and this is what we want to do. And some VP person who had the inspiration, decided that this was a project worth doing. How would you engage such a person?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that like lots of people do already do that, right? Like people who can't see or can't see well are already doing this, and people call up travel agents who do this for them. So looking to where these conversations are already happening and interviewing those folks and learning what works well in those circumstances, I think is something valuable. And honestly, that's not a form of research that a lot of companies that I, as a consultant, want to pay for, but it's always where I want to start. But in terms of like, just kind of my current design chops, it's tricky because some people are like, you pick for me, give me the highest rated under $200, a mile from my theme park, perfect. Like, I don't want to make decisions. And some people need to know all the options. And obviously that's a greater challenge, walking people through a lot of options. So I think, picking out a plane ticket, we know there's essential pieces of information that we have to gather. So there, it's like you're just trying to communicate to people, like, I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and then I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about the tickets available. Like, just kind of letting them know, like, we got to gather a lot of data to give you your options, the city, the times, all this stuff. Hotels, I think there could be interesting things that people are doing, like, do you want the suite? Do you want the queen bed? Do you want the king bed? What are the amenities? And people need that information to make decisions. I see a lot of companies just trying to like get the text to speech to like read off the description on the website. But really, I think to do that in a lovely and graceful way, people should be doing like audio tours or like higher production versions of giving this information that's specifically written for voice. So that's a little bit of a jumble of like all the there's so many complications in that question, but I do think there are big challenges in getting people to interact with information, and I think most of the time companies are trying to be like, make it as close as possible to the experience we already have and the content that we already have, and that's why a lot of the experiences are mediocre.
Yeah, I guess I was asking because I wanted to see if it was part of your job to say, dude, no, that's not good. You're not going to get it. No matter what, with the current technology that we have, that's not going to happen. You're going to spend $1 million. You're going to get a crappy experience. But like what you said, which is we could do something for folks who travel like once a week. There are people like that. They just travel. and when they go to San Francisco, they do the same city, to the same hotel, the car rental is the same. It's basically, I want to go to San Francisco, done, kind of a thing, right? So do you think is it part of your job to push back and sort of help them, find the fit between the interface, because you have the interface and the best practices, and you have the technology, what it can do, what it cannot do. For example, Alexa, you can't interrupt it while it's talking unless you say the name of the thing. So Alexa, right? And then when it gives you a turn, say, okay, where would you like to go? You gotta hurry. You gotta answer within 2 seconds. You can't just say, or let's say it says, what time would you like to do? I think I'm gonna. The human being understands I'm not done, right? But Alexa does not. Alexa is very primitive, right? Just waits for silence, which is hopefully something they will fix. But that combination of, okay, but there are best practices and there's the technology what it is today, and even when somebody's talking to a human being who is trained, it's a far better experience for somebody, at least for me, to go to my browser and spend an hour just doing it right. So is that part of your job, you think, or a job of a UX designer, to push back?
I think yes. I have certainly worked at a place, at least one place, where when it gets to me, that SOW is signed. Yes. And it's already, the ink is dry, and we're already building a something. So that I think designers are often in that position, and I think that is in some ways a misuse of the designers, or a limited way of treating designers. I do think a lot of designers have the experience to be good strategists, and I always prefer to be brought in early in the process, where you go, okay, what business problem are you trying to solve? So I'm sure you've encountered this. A lot of companies are like, we're not trying to solve a problem. We need voice. Voice is the future. Yeah. We don't know anything about it. We just need to start doing it. Whereas like a designer will always tell you, like, design works as a problem-solving mechanism. So we need to figure out the problem. I mean, I certainly would. I've said this publicly many times, but I have built many a chatbot that didn't need to exist. They just needed better information architecture on their website. It's like, make a great website. You don't need a chatbot today. You've probably encountered. I think with your experience and having, you're sort of at the helm of things, and so you might have more agency to kind of gently advise people on.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I guess my point, or what I would love for things to evolve towards is the UX designers need to be pulled in way early in the conversation before the deal is closed, right? Before the SOW is signed, because companies just get themselves in a lot of trouble because the salesperson, even the sales engineer, they don't know really the limitations of the bots, and they're eager to get the person to sign. And in fact, they're eager to get them to sign a big number. And so they're like, yeah, we can do all these things for sure, right? And so then when the SOW is given to the designer, they're like, oh, are you serious, right? And then what happens usually, if the design team is strong, is they will push back, and if the salesperson cares, or at least the account manager cares, they'll have the conversation with the client to make sure they understand that, hey, let's phase it out. Usually it's like phase 1, phase 2, right? Phase 1 will be this thing, and then with time things evolve towards something that's usable. Otherwise, if everybody is just following orders, like, okay, I'm going to follow the letter, you end up with everybody being dissatisfied. Yeah. The client is dissatisfied because nobody's using this thing, and whoever is using this thing is not happy, and so anyone who thinks strategically about client, keeping your clients happy, should be careful about not overpromising, and should understand the interface. Okay, let me go to the next about 15 minutes, and we'll end on time. Let me go to page 100 of the book, which is another interesting thing that I picked up here. 100. And that is prompts to discourage sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very interesting. The question there is, what are you guys trying to accomplish with this? I'm asking it completely neutrally. In fact, I sympathize with you very much. I just want to understand, what was the purpose of putting this together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are such great talks and a great amount of research on illustrating, first of all, this phenomenon that people sexually harass chatbots, voice bots, voice assistants, all of it. Often as a joke, which I find really disturbing. Like, sexual harassment in our culture is so common that it occurs to people to try that as a conversational tactic, right? So I think, first of all, we're trying to demonstrate to people and just kind of reiterate research that already exists that, like, this is gonna happen. Especially if it's female presenting. And so the phenomenon is well proven out. There was a really good report by UNESCO called "I'd Blush If I Could." This is like the tiniest little corner of the problem. That report is really thorough if the topic is of interest. And we reference some other talks and research in the section as well. First, it happens, so we have to plan for it. And second, and this, we're not the only people with this criticism, it seems like when the first tactic companies tried to handle sexual harassment was to make a joke out of it. And that approach actually can, like, gamify, you know, it can make it seem funny, or actually encourage you to do it again because your friend's over and you're like, hey, look what happens when I say this to so-and-so. And that feels really inappropriate. Like, people often don't realize when they are committing sexual harassment aggressions or microaggressions. So making a joke out of it is not the right tactic. And there's kind of a pivot happening in the field where companies, big companies, are moving away from the joke responses to more clear, firm, you know, responses that indicate that it's not appropriate. And I've encountered this in my work too. We were making like a female presenting kiosk that it just answered questions at a conference, at a public space. And I was like, hey, we should have a couple backup responses in case people will say, you know, the avatar that was chosen not by me was a very kind of buxom, attractive woman presenting, you know, appearance. And I said, you know, we should probably, like, if people are joking about this, we should probably like have some responses. And my coworkers kept wanting it to be a funny response. And I was like, if someone said to me that I was really attractive at a conference, I would say, this is a professional conference and I am at work. That's not appropriate. Like, that's what I would say, you know, because socially it is not appropriate. So I think bots need to take responsibility and kind of show like, hey, that's not okay. That's a weird thing to say. And I think those are, you know, the things that we communicate in the chapter. Like, let's really think hard about this and make sure that we're not giving these comments a pass. It could be a good learning opportunity.
Okay. Learning opportunity. Okay. Let me ask you this. If I were to say, you know, the best strategy, I don't know if it's the best strategy, but let me just propose it, right? Is to ignore. Say, I didn't understand what you said. Blah, blah, blah. Something awful. Sorry, I didn't understand what you said, right? Are we missing an opportunity there to tell them, hey, you know, you shouldn't be saying these things? So I just want to see if the ignore strategy is something to consider. Just pretend like you don't understand what they're saying.
I think things should go further and say, like, I don't answer, even as simple as I don't answer questions like that. Because it's not that it didn't understand, it's that the statement that the user made was inappropriate. And there are ways to communicate that. I mean, in life, I would certainly be I'd be a little bit more forceful than I just described, but it's not a question of misrecognition. It wasn't something to be answered. And that's what I think. And Kathy Pearl's book has a section on this where she interviews Deborah Dahl, who worked on Cortana, and that's the advice there too. It's being really explicit, like not using the joking approach or the misrecognition approach, kind of shutting it down in some way, but pretending it didn't happen doesn't seem to be enough to me.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's probably that's a point I want to look into myself. Is that a way to humanize by reacting and saying I'm offended? Are we humanizing the bot inadvertently, right? But that's a separate. I'm just trying to see all these.
It's not offended. The bot doesn't have any feelings about it. It's just inappropriate, and it doesn't answer questions like that. So
I understand
it's
that.
not an emotional thing.
But it's all about what is the perception of the user? Perception was offended, right? Perception is, I said something and I touched the feelings, right? But it's a fascinating thing because it's for me. I'm always fascinated about this thing. Are people going to humanize a thing? And this is just one of those where I want to think some more about it. I guess there? Yeah.
I have a good example of what this looks like in a different space. Somebody tweeted, and I'll retweet it. Somebody tweeted about how a child was talking to Siri, and Siri said, and the kid said something slightly mean or annoyed, and Siri said, "That's not very nice." And the kid cried for a long time because they thought Siri was a robot and didn't have feelings, and the fact that Siri said something that indicated it did have feelings that could be hurt was really disturbing to this kid, and they were kind of a little bit messed up by it. So I do think what we're talking about is getting on that edge of
right.
These things don't have feelings, but is it good or bad if they pretend to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the studies show that you can't have true intelligence without an emotional dimension to your perception of the situation, right? So you have to react emotionally if you're going to be intelligent, right? So if technology and all these AIs are moving towards truly intelligent and the singularity and all that, and people are working on this, they are going to inject at least behavior that is decidedly emotional at least in its appearance, right? It looks like, so being offended is functional. I mean, it has a functional component. It's not just icing on the cake. Being happy is not just icing on the cake, and being sarcastic and being, whatever. I think that's the next level of intelligence if you want to get these things to be really intelligent, right? But it's a very complicated topic, and I think what will happen is things will go. Things are so complex that they will go in so many directions that it's going to be hard for us to control where they go, right? Today you can create an AI and you can do many things, like this thing that can write letters, right? Love letters, apparently, this AI. Well done, love letters that probably a guy can't write.
Wait, right? You'll have to text me or message me.
I will. They make claims that they can write better marketing, better, and even better love letters, right? And I believe it, because I think there's a science and art to writing letters, and if you give a bot or an AI 10,000 love letters, it sort of figures out how to come up with a love letter. So that's sort of disturbing in a way. But I think the future is going to be very. It's going to be a brave new world for sure. Let me go to. I have 5 minutes. Okay, so let me close with this. Where were you born?
I was born in Wichita, Kansas.
And is that where you were raised?
Yep, I lived there for 27 years. I mean, I lived in Kansas in general.
In Kansas, okay. And then where did you go to school or university?
My undergrad, I went to the University of Kansas, and my graduate degree, I went to the University of Florida.
And what were you majoring in?
Undergrad, chemistry, and graduate, my MFA in fiction writing.
Nice. Yeah, transition is very
yeah,
very
I think a lot of us are interested in the science and the humanities, and sort of this field has a lot of interdisciplinary people.
No, that's great. I mean, that I think you're going to see a lot of folks like that who have both halves of their brain, active. Let's say it that way. And so let's leave with this. What advice would you give to an aspiring voice UX designer, somebody who bumps into this out of nowhere, is enthralled, wants to get into it? What would you recommend that they would do as a first couple of steps?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I always like to say, like, if you're interested in this field, there is likely a way in. Whether it's through your current skill set or a skill set that you build. I think the first steps are there's so much community, whether it's like following people on Twitter, whether it's Women in Voice or Voice Lunch. Joining those communities will be, I think, the fastest way to learn, to just be sort of submerged or, ambiently learn from the people around you who already know a lot and who have incredible resources. So that's the fast track. Is like when I first started and I joined Twitter and realized that other conversational people were on Twitter, I would tweet and Kathy Pearl would respond to my tweet. It was incredible. And I think that community closeness is still there. So that's always the first thing. And then the next thing, I would honestly say that going to conferences was a huge game changer for me as well. Like being in physical space with people. Hopefully we can have that again, but I do think it exists virtually as well. So for me, it's all about the people connection. I think our book is great. I think Kathy Pearl's book is great. I think Ahmed, your book is great. So definitely tons to read, but the interpersonal pathways to learning were the most powerful for me.
Yeah, I agree. And it's amazing how I think the last 2-3 years, the community just get to be so close, right? And so welcoming also of new folks, right? So somebody new comes in and say, hey, I would like to, and all of a sudden they're talking to folks who've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
So I like the culture, let's say, the culture of our community. Let's hope it stays that way. Rebecca Evanhoe, thank you so much for joining me. This is the book, guys. Go buy it, and tell your friends to buy it. It's a fun book. It's I think your personalities come through pretty loud and clear. Diana's quirky personality, and yours, which is more poised and more to the point, right? But also fun. But yes, thank you so much, Rebecca. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. This is really great. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.